I'm at Excel Ventures. We're in the Prudential, which is about a 5-minute walk away. We do all levels of healthcare, ranging as far and as broad as you possibly can. Right now, we're focusing principally on biotech and health IT. Diagnostics and devices have been laggards for us recently, and so that's where we're focusing most of my energy. I personally am a scientist. I was a professor for many years. I'm also an author. This is a free copy of this, To the Best Question That Makes Us Look Smart, okay? Signed by me. I got one copy here. This is a book, it's a book about updating Darwin's theories to be relevant today. It's, well, LA Times is now, it just came out a couple months ago. LA Times said it's been nominated as Science Book of the Year, Financial Times and others. So that's my pitch. I'm happy to tell you any more if you want to hear about it. Now, I've asked everybody to tell them one interesting fact that you won't find on the internet about them. I'm a serious jock. I played tennis my whole life. But my son last year, who's a great golfer, came to me and said, Dad, you know, I respect your tennis, but you're worthless on the golf course. I'm tired of carrying you in all of our father-son tournaments. So either you take lessons or you're off the father-son team. So I had to sign up for golf lessons, and I'm slowly learning. So that's where I am. So cheer on my golf next year. So next up, Arjun.
Thanks, Steve. This is working? Perfect. So I'm from 5M Ventures. 5M Ventures is early stage bi-coastal VC group. So much like my colleagues here, we like academic spin-outs, anywhere from the academic spin-out realm to phase 1 assets, with a preference to platform technologies, and I'm sure something that we'll touch upon here. But we do look at single assets and particularly pipeline and product type opportunity. Something I know that we have a lot of European and Canadian companies, so we certainly look at Canada, so we look at Europe. So our hunting grounds are much broader than San Francisco and Cambridge on that too. I think what else is important about 5M is that we take very, again, like our colleagues, a very scientific, technical approach and very hands-on. So we like to work with our entrepreneurs and oftentimes either partners or investment professionals who take operational roles in particularly seed stage companies. So we like to get our hands dirty. In terms of interesting factoid, I have two, because I cannot match the one that Steve articulated. One is that I was a doctor and I was terrible at it, and I was an entrepreneur and I was terrible at it, and now I find myself as a VC. It's too early to say if I'm terrible at it. We'll let 5M be the judge in a year's time, but hoping that some of you guys help me with some good opportunities that I can bring back to my team. And then the second is that I'm from Australia and really believe in science that is not from the typical hunting grounds of North America, whether it's Europe, Canada, Australia. To see how we can bring that to market, globally. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So this is working. So Sam Hall, Apple Tree Partners. I co-lead our translational or early stage therapeutics investing practice, which is an important part of what we do. Apple Tree is a firm that's been around since 1999, but was really in kind of a lesser form than it is now. So managed much smaller funds on the order of 100 million for about a decade, and then beginning in 2010, 2011, raised a much larger pool of capital, which is now Apple Tree 4. It's a $1.5 billion pool of capital, which is a little unusual. It's got actually a really long horizon to it. So it's not structured like a typical venture fund that has a pretty finite investment window. We actually have a perpetual arrangement with our limited partners where we can support companies potentially all the way through commercialization. And that's really our raison d'etre. You might ask how that fits with early stage investing, but actually I think it does, because early companies are the source of some of the most compelling innovations, and if you do want to build a company for the long term, it's important to have really powerful, compelling, clinically useful programs in there. And so I think the activities that I'm describing are a really important part of building out the Apple Tree vision. So we're based in New York, but are globally focused, I think, or globally agnostic in terms of the source of innovation. And we will build companies really anywhere. I think we do want to make a big impact in the New York ecosystem. I think we're probably active across too many disciplines within healthcare, but do have a thriving med tech team, which is probably of less interest to this group, and do a lot. And so in terms of quick factoids about me, it's not as personal, but I guess I've been lucky to be involved in, even though I'm a really young guy, 2 approved drugs so far, and hopefully 2 more on the way over the next 12 to 14 months. And not one of them has had fewer than 1 CRL, so be careful if you work with me. Yeah, so that's me.
I'm Asai Pimer. I represent the MedImmune Ventures. We're a fund that was started back in 2002. And we are a $400 million fund. We're evergreen. We predominantly invest in therapeutics, though occasionally we do medical devices. I would say predominantly do early stage investing and are prepared to invest all the way through inflection points. Occasionally we make later stage investments. It's 3 partners, myself and 2 others. We've got an office in Palo Alto as well as on the East Coast. And we focus far broader than the areas of interest of our parent company, which is AstraZeneca MedImmune. We are financial investors, so we're not a strategic investor like many of the other corporate venture funds. And we all come from private funds, so that's the experience that we bring. Though we make most of our investments in the U.S., we occasionally make investments elsewhere. So I have an Australian portfolio company, and there's great science there.
Hi, I'm Jason Perlani. I'm a principal with Pappas Ventures. Our fund is about 20 years old, started in '94. We manage 4 very traditional life science funds that invest in drugs, devices, and diagnostics. Last year, we started a new initiative with an Italian pharmaceutical company called Chiesi Pharmaceutica. You may be familiar with. They do north of $1 billion in revenue annually. They're based in Italy. They wanted to start a venture fund in North America, and they partnered with Pappas Ventures, and we are co-managing this fund in collaboration with Chiesi. This is a fund that's focused exclusively on therapeutics in the rare disease space, so diseases that affect 200,000 patients or less in the United States. Pappas Ventures funds have always been kind of stage agnostic, geography agnostic within North America. The Chiesi fund is looking at earlier stage opportunities, so primarily weighting our investment shift towards preclinical, especially in the early stage of the fund cycle. We also have a much broader geographic focus, so we can look at European investments as well as those in North America. In terms of rare diseases, a very broad basket, and so the types of rare diseases that we're most interested in are monogenic inherited disorders, some very selective types of rare cancers. We look at diseases for which there are no therapeutic options for patients, diseases that have high mortality, morbidity, very poor quality of life, and where we can readily identify patients either through newborn screening test, genetic test, and some other sort or biomarker. And in terms of preclinical data that we really like to see, we prefer investments or areas where there are very good animal models that faithfully predict the course of the disease in the human case, which in the case of genetic disorders is potentially highly likely.
Fun factoid, Jason?
Fun factoid. So I was told to go humorous, so I...
You don't have
my fun factoid. So my fun factoid is that I like really bad jokes. And, I have a bad joke, but I fear that I may spoil your first impressions of me, but I'm going to go for it anyway. So man walks in, really bad jokes, that you see now, right? So man walks into a butcher shop, walks up to the butcher and says, "Are you a gambling man?" The butcher says, "Yeah, I'm a gambling man." So the man says, "Well, I bet you can't touch that meat up on the top shelf." The butcher looks at it, turns to the man and says, "No, I'm not going to take your bet. Guys, I'll give you $100 if you can touch that."
How many deals a year do you do in your fund in early stage venture? I'll go first. We do across everything. We only do 2 to 4. So, on a portfolio of 20 companies over 5 years, 4 deals adds up to 20, and that's kind of the exit timeline. So that just gives you a format for understanding what the odds are. So if 1 a quarter is about a rate that we can operate at. Somehow we manage to find work to work all day long every day, but that's about what we do.
Yeah, so I would say very similar, 1 to 2 deals a quarter. We are actively investing from our 4th fund, so there's probably more like 6 to 8 deals a year, all of them early stage.
Yeah, it probably didn't come out of my introduction, but we really lead everything we do, and as a firm are really creating companies in large measure when it comes to early stage opportunities. Not always, but often. And certainly are working to build them. So we actually do not a similar amount, but probably 2 to 3 a year is going to be the run rate. We did 2 last year, and I think it's going to fall under that zip code. I think it depends on the nature of the company.
Yeah, so we're similar. We do about 2. There's 3 partners. We've got a big portfolio. With early stage companies, it's very hands-on. We sometimes take management roles in these companies, and there's just so much bandwidth we can take on.
Right. Jason?
Yeah, so our fund's only 1 year old, the rare disease fund, and right now we've made 1 investment, and that's in a preclinical company, so 100% early stage so far. And we're on a track to do probably 2 to 3 investments per year. I would say 90% will be early stage.
Can you believe we get paid? It's unbelievable. So everybody in the audience is saying, how do I become that 1 or 2 deals this year? And in fact, we sometimes do deals together. So it's and the industry is built on trust. We have to build trust. So it's very hard for us to say no. And so the waves come in September. I think I had 3 meetings the day after Labor Day. January after JP Morgan, and May is when we get these huge influxes of inquiries, because that's when everybody knows the best time it comes. So there's off times as well. We actually do deals in the summer. So let's talk about some of the basic facts. Right now, everybody that comes in wants to be an immuno-oncology company or a rare disease company. Is that the right place to be? And everybody is actually trying to recreate their company in ways that didn't exist. And this could be companies that are 15 years old. What's your perspectives on doing those deals versus other deals right now?
So I think it's a very good point. As it pertains to gene therapy, immuno-oncology, we have internal firm-wide theses, and there's specific areas within those 2 buckets that we proactively look for, and we have been for 18 months. We've not done a deal in immuno-oncology, and we have a seed stage investment, a company that we've created from the ground up in the gene therapy, gene editing space. So the companies that we have invested in are a small molecule oncology company, a CF company. So I think really the key thing is the quality of the science. It's not whatever is the flavor of the month or the flavor of the year, and to brand your company as such, and to emphasize a link where a link does not exist. Does no one a service is what I would say.
I completely echo those comments. I mean, to me, I think it really comes down to the quality of the science, the linearity of the development program, and Appletree as a firm, by virtue of our long-term focus, probably in contrast to some others, is not. Waves do very little for us other than increase pre-money valuation in terms of the competitive landscape. So, we're not trying to engineer something for a quick flip, and we really want anything we invest in to have potential to generate drugs. And so, rebranding it something that is perhaps marginally or potentially immuno-oncology as such to market into the wave really is almost counterproductive for our firm. But I don't know that that's the case for everyone.
Yeah, so for us, we try not to be dogmatic about these things. So we recognize that there is a lot of promise in immuno-oncology, and most of the big pharma companies are making big pushes for it, which creates a lot of exit opportunities in theory. That being said, there's just a lot of companies trying to brand themselves as immuno-oncology. It goes back to sort of the fundamentals of peeling back the onion and really understanding how is this differentiated, what effect size is likely, what's the risk reward. So I think it's very difficult to be the immuno-oncology company that gets funded these days because there's so much competition. That is an area that we think a lot about, and we recognize there's likely great opportunities for the right companies.
Well, you're a rare disease guy, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess
how do you define rare disease? I mean, can it be resistant to Rituxan as
rare? So right, you can get orphan drug designation on many for many indications that really don't fit our sweet spot. And that it's not a pet peeve, but I think it's very analogous to what prior panelists have been describing. We're very interested in, as I said, in rare inherited disorders where you have very high mortality and morbidity. And we oftentimes see presentations from companies that have technically, we can get orphan drug designation in a very esoteric subset. You're subslicing the patient population to such an extent that it's third line, antibiotic resistant, whatever. That doesn't really move the needle for us in terms of our thesis.
And I would say that the lesson to be learned from these two spaces being so hot are maybe three things. One is, anytime you can have a very small clinical trial that gets a meaningful endpoint, it's a venture model. We do not have $200 million to invest in anything as a group. We would never collect it. Maybe Appletree is the exception, but in general, it's very hard to collect that much out of the venture community, so we won't even look at it. The other is the reimbursements on these things are so high that in fact Wall Street values this. You can sell a few drugs for $100,000 versus some drugs, inexpensive drugs, an antibiotic for a couple hundred. And so that's why there's interest in there. And so to the extent you can use those rules and not those fields, you actually can mimic what we're interested in. So places we don't do. Asthma has been a challenge, but they're finding ways to call subsets of asthma orphan. CHF, trials are huge. We just can't touch, gene therapy's finally broken through, but some of the cell therapies remain unknown in terms of the regulatory and the reimbursements right now. So we trust the science, but there has to be a clinical regulatory path that's affordable to us for $30 to $100 million, okay? That's a very simple pragmatic rule. Let's go to another topic.
Steve, I'd love to build on that a little bit. So taking immuno-oncology as an area, for instance, there's a lot of talk about combo therapies. I mean, if that's your proof of concept, you have to build it on top of another therapy or two. That gets prohibitively more expensive and murkier, to be able to really demonstrate that value. So we think about that from a standpoint of how much capital is really needed to get to that true inflection point to show the data. And it makes it more difficult.
Another question we get a lot is there's been a lot of interest of late in platform technologies. And as soon as I say invest in platform, the response immediately is, well, I have a platform. It's a very simple story. So versus single assets, I'd like to hear the perspective of people here. As you think about your plan, how do you actually set that up?
So what I would advise is looking at the historical investments of the investors you speak to. And as it pertains to 5M, we certainly like platforms. We've had most of our success with platforms. Not only is it a good risk mitigation strategy if the first indication does not pan out, if the first compound does not pan out, given that oftentimes with the platform technology, you will have 4 or 5 investors and anywhere between $60 to $100 million to get to clinical POC. So you have at least 1, if not 2 shots at goal. The other is that it offers creative BD opportunities and the opportunity also to access non-equity capital. So that's important. From a single asset point of view, it's a different risk profile. But as we think of where we're at in a fund, and particularly towards the latter stages of a fund, we like corporate spin-out opportunities around single assets. Not because it's a quick flip, but from a portfolio management point of view, it offers a distinct opportunity set, which again we've had some success in, which you can access crossover investors in public markets within 12 months of data. So I think being cognizant of the firm and what they've invested in historically, and who you speak to, what board he or she sits on, will help inform you of your best approach.
Comments?
I mean, so Appletree's had a number of platform investments over time. One of my portfolio companies probably falls into that bucket. I think we've had ups and downs with it, and I think it's really important to know where to point the cannon, which can be a really big challenge. For one of my companies, we've got detailed bioinformatics that creates basically a phone book of everything we should be targeting that we can then cross-reference against certain genetic diseases, and it really has focused things. I think Other companies take a lot longer to figure that out. So I think for us, probably the Third Rock team is on their various websites has coined the term product engine, which is not my favorite term, but to me that's kind of what we usually would look for in a platform in terms of really seeing a clear path to having clinical or periclinical programs come out of that in a tractable period of time and knowing what they're going to go after.
If I think about my partners, we all have different opinions on these things. I've been very comfortable making asset-centric investments, single product companies. I also have successful platform companies. Some of my partners are more biased towards having multiple shots on goal. I think sometimes investors find themselves in the full sense of comfort having sort of multiple shots on goal and really nothing in particular. To the point that Arjun made earlier, I think it's a platform that enables you to strike the early corporate deals that are validating, so you can really leverage that to appropriately fund the company and whatever products you want to be able to focus on. That's a good strategy.
But I think multiple related or synergistic assets is different from the platform. To me, I would draw a line between those.
The platform we like a novel chemistry. Go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing that I would add is that, back to Steve's point, is that when you look at a particular venture investment over the life of that investment, you're putting to work, mid-double-digit $1 million. Typically, you're moving one asset through clinical development. And what we've observed is it's very hard, it's very rare that you are acquired, you're acquired on the basis of that lead asset only. You're not paid for the platform typically because it could be acquired strategically, are not interested in the other therapeutic areas you're going after, or you've just not vetted anything that's come out of there that's gone through phase 1, phase 2. So that is the challenge.
That's a good point. And just to amplify on that, so we're techies. We love platforms technically, but when you go to exit, 95% of the value is that first drug going to clinic. 95%. And so even though you got 20 others, they're worth it in total 5% of the value. And the only way you get value on the platform is to get a second drug in the clinic. What's the cost of that? So as you think about your first drug and that laser shot to clinic, think about that. It's not simply going to be something that is discounted because your second drug's better. That is the key. All right.
I think most of the time that is true, although I've seen situations where it's very competitive.
Yeah.
And in those instances, the acquirers would actually justify the higher price tag by thinking about the platform. It's more the exception than the rule, though.
So let's move a little bit to the reason we like platforms fundamentally is this optionality around partnering. You're not giving away the key asset. I don't know if anybody has any war stories or specifics or comments about partnering, do or don't, early on.
So yes, it's a good point. I'm sure something that many of you think about. What we like to see, certainly is that optionality, that ability to strike deals, creatively, to validate not just the technology, but also to get the attention of other investors, particularly for our seed stage companies, as we think of syndicating a Series A, having a corporate either as an investor or particularly in the early stage partnership makes it more attractive to certainly to other investors. You, as Steve alluded to, and as some of our colleagues have alluded to, you don't want to give away the crown jewels. Sometimes at the seed stage, you're not even sure what the crown jewels are. So we take that with a grain of salt. Sometimes we look at non-therapeutic opportunities for partnering. So in the tools or reagent space, if it is a platform, if there is that potential, we look to give away those rights and retain full product rights until the full breadth of the platform is announces itself.
In my experience, it's far more valuable to get the advice of big pharma with early stage companies than to strike a specific deal. And the reason is because these big pharma companies have big portfolios, and you can never be sure how your project will be prioritized. 2-3 years down the line, when the people may have changed, priorities may have changed. You just can't bank on people taking your baby and developing it exactly in the way that makes sense and on the timeline that makes sense. Corporate venture funds, I find, are actually a good partner because particularly where you don't give away anything, you just benefit from maybe some of the pharma capabilities. So in my experience, we love co-investing with other corporate venture funds and getting the benefit of advice and leveraging the development.
Do you want to comment on that, Jason, since you're corporate venture fund?
So we're technically corporate, however, we're much like Medi, we're a financial investor, so there's no strategic. All of our investments are very clean. There are no strategic rights. We don't want to acquire these assets. And I think those are the types of corporate strategic relationships you want to develop. I think the devil, as others have alluded to, the devil is in the details, and it all comes down to what are the rights, what have you given up for that partnership. If you've partnered a program with pharma and they hand it back to you, the optics of that from the rest of the investment community is not positive. And you may think that's great. Oh, I partnered with pharma X, and if they say no, I still get that product back. It's now got hair on it, and people are going to wonder why didn't they exercise. And it could be for it could be for reasons that have nothing to do with your asset. It could be strategic. It could be the CEO doesn't like that therapeutic space. Who knows? But you just have to be very careful with. And so again, not to sound like a broken record here, but we prefer very clean, very transparent, no rights. Just try to find mutually beneficial relationships.
Yeah, one thing. So Appletree generally would prefer to help companies use our capital to take things further before partnering. And I mean, if an asset genuinely is non-core, I think we're very open to that. But I don't think there's any such thing as a non-dilutive deal because inevitably you're exchanging value. And we talked about not knowing which of these kids will grow up to be the superstar, and you've leaked value. It might be worth it, but I think it's a decision we take pretty seriously.
And one more thing, these pharma companies, they're very sophisticated. And the other thing I'll say that we've observed in our portfolio is there's an asymmetry of information that often takes place with these partnerships. The pharma company tends to learn more about the asset, the molecule, and what your small company is up to. They're very reluctant to share what they're doing and what they've learned. And that is a cost that you just can't predict at the outset, but I would say it's more than 50% of the time that happens.
So just to let's start one more topic before we come back to the questions. So to wrap that up, as we look at a venture platform versus single asset, we understand the exit, they're going to be valued on that single asset. So the platform doesn't have any greater dollar value to us. It just gives us some optionality we want to think about. So for example, the Asian market is open now. There's suddenly diseases there that some of our platform companies could tailor to go into the Asian partnering, which if you have a single asset may not be as easy if there's not a problem there. Finally, this brings up the question that's on everybody's mind all the time, and I'll end it with this last question, then we'll open it up, which is valuation. How much do we pay for deals? We can throw out numbers if we want, and how do we think about it? And I'll go first. Everything I learned about valuation, I learned in 5th grade, which is it's simple arithmetic. If I put for a fund to get a 4x, so we have some losers. We need some that are going to get 10x and some that are 3, etc. So in principle, we're looking to get, say, a 4x on every deal in the round we're in at a minimum. So if you do the arithmetic, and you can go look up what the exit value is, say it's 150. Ideally, just from a pragmatic perspective, we're looking to get, ideally, meaningful clinical data on a post money of 30 million in the round we come in. That could be a Series A that has 3 million valuation with 27 million in, or it could be 29 million and some million to get the data. That's just a simple operating rule. We clearly move way beyond or way below it. But the point at which we come in is, for us, is that clinical validating data and how big is this in. And we come in with Appletree and 3 or 4 of these people, like at Aileron, we're in that with Appletree and 4 pharmas. We're raising 40 million at a clip. At that point, we're absolutely confident we're going to have the data. So for us, it's risk mitigation. The valuations, I'll let you guys think of the numbers, but I can come back to that later. How do you view valuation?
So we differentiate between single asset and platform. The other pertinent factor is what stage is either the asset or the platform, the lead asset of the platform in its validation, whether it's preclinical or even clinical. And I think how Steve outlined it is very accurate. Single assets with some form of preclinical validation, at least for us, a high single-digit pre-money Series A valuation. Platform with some preclinical validation is similar, perhaps a bit north of that. I would say that in this current environment, we have certainly seen inflation and asset price inflation, particularly here in the U.S. What has that meant for 5 a.m.? It's meant that we've retained our discipline. We've looked at deals in Europe with similar quality of assets, which are half the pre-money that you have here in North America. And we've got creative in terms of how we structure deals and at what price we structure deals in terms of tranches. So I think if the investor syndicate is attractive to a company, there are always ways that you can figure these things out. But there's no price that there's no it's something that we grapple with currently.
Comment? Sam, you guys are the rest of you so early.
Two thoughts here. So I think at the end of the day, to be quite frank, valuation is a function of how competitive that process is. To some degree, if you've got a hot deal, then you'll see valuation creep up. The other thing I'll say is that philosophically, I think there are two types of investors in life sciences. And what you're seeing now with valuations creeping up, you see a group of crossovers, more generalist, what I would call newer players in the space that are less valuation sensitive. Their return hurdles might be lower because they're crossover funded, so they can tap the public markets. Their investor expectations are different than ours. And then there's the other group of investors who have been through multiple cycles and are not going to chase valuations because we try to remain disciplined, and we have been there, done that before, and we know that we can argue whether we're in a bubble or not, but at some point the business cycles are they're cyclical, right? They repeat, and at some point we'll be in a trough, and we don't want to have overly valued companies that are trying to raise Series B at unsustainable valuation. So much like Arjun said, we've always looked in underserved markets. I don't think that Boston and San Francisco have monopolies on innovation, and you can find really good opportunities outside of those core areas.
So you're hearing quite a range of comments here, and I think it's worth opening the floor up for questions and comments. We touched on a number of things. Yes?
I have a rare disease question for you. Is there something that you're really, the holy grail of therapeutics that you'd be looking for, a disease you'd be looking to target? Cystic fibrosis, sickle cell disease,
Yeah, so we're pretty disease agnostic. There's not a specific disease that I would say, certain, I think what's hot for us right now, and I can give you an idea of what's hot for us in rare diseases. I think very conceptually, there are a group of metabolic disorders, lysosomal storage disorders, that have a significant CNS component to the disease. In some cases, there are no therapeutic options. In other cases, there are therapeutic options that treat the more systemic symptoms of the disease, and the CNS components are not treated. So we are looking at, we're very interested in ways, modalities, or approaches that can help treat the totality of those diseases. That could be gene therapy, it could be blood-brain barrier. So I'm thinking about enzyme replacement technology, for example. There are a lot of BBB technologies will allow enzymes to cross the blood-brain barrier to help provide benefit in the CNS. Allosteric chaperones, so small molecules that can modulate enzymatic activity in the case of these metabolic disorders. Those small chaperones can potentially cross the blood-brain barrier and act in the CNS. So I think that's a frontier that we're looking at very closely within rare disease.
Other question? I know you had one earlier on.
Yes, you were all raising the caution flag on pharmaceutical partnerships, and I think that a properly structured partnership can set up a very attractive exit scenario.
I think we all agree, and the question that's dynamically comes to mind all the time is, when do you do that? Do you do it in coincidence with Series A when you have no clinical data, or do you wait later while having discussions with it? And I think that's the dynamic that plays out in the boardroom as you start to look at it.
Where do you, as an investor panel, where do you guys look for promising investments? I mean, is it on NIH Reporter to see who's been funded by the federal government? I mean, does that de-risk anything for you guys if you come across technologies that have been well funded from non-dilutive sources?
For me, I look, lots of different places, but the highest quality deals come from entrepreneurs that I've backed before. In that network, referrals from people that have earned my respect through working together.
And just to reiterate that, we'll look at any technology. It can come from anywhere on the planet. There are very smart people. I've been to Malaysia looking at technology. I'm sure these guys have been everywhere because they're very innovative people. With the innovators, they don't understand is the market. They don't know if they should be orphan or cancer. I remember one scientist said to me, I said, what are you going to use this for? And he goes, well, lots of people have cancer. I said, well, it's unrelated to cancer as far as I can tell. So you have this translational element that remains a challenge. And so when we look at it, the secret that was just alluded to is almost every deal we do is brought to us by a friend. It's by friend, I mean someone we know, because that's a filter. If you see 100 deals a year personally and you come to me with one, I know that one is better than the other 99 you looked at. And so in this city, if you can't find me through one of someone I know and trust, you're actually at a disadvantage getting the deal done. So network, come through someone, and then you got to build the trust, because we're going to be in that boardroom for the next 5 years, trusting each other, and all we know today is the plan you have is wrong. And so we got to figure it out together. And so it's building that trust.
I would emphasize that, and particularly building a relationship with, with either the partner or the actual venture capitalist. The first deal that I did at 5 AM was a CF company, and the particular CEO in question, I met him, and it was only after about 8 months, 4 months where the discussion had gone quiet that we actually invested. But we coached him through a preclinical data package that would be important for us to get comfortable with the investment, and that process I think was important for our team to invest and for our team to help construct the syndicate that can get the Series A over the line. So I think it's not a question of an initial interaction. It's a question of building a relationship, of really looking at the network, and by network it's the portfolio companies, it's the SABs of those portfolio companies, it's the other investors in those portfolio companies, and looking really to build a constructive dialogue between you, your company, and the scientists of your company, the backers of your company, whether that's an SAB or a well-known professor, and the other partner.
Any other comments around that?
I mean, I think ultimately we're just looking for objective data that shows that you can execute, right? And that's either prior direct working relationship with an entrepreneur, or, as Arjun pointed out, several months of watching you iterate, watching you develop, watching you take advice, watching you move your preclinical studies through the right value inflection point. So it's really about execution.
One thing I would just add is I've seen instances where entrepreneurs did a very smart thing by reaching out to patient foundations who have already scientific and clinical advisory boards where things kind of got percolated and supported, and then some of the more prominent scientists, clinicians, got affiliated with the project. That's a nice way to increase credibility of an early stage idea and really force people to really take a second look.
Where's the sweet spot for you guys in terms of where preclinical assets would be? Do you have a sweet spot?
For us, it's animal model,
Yeah.
that hopefully is predictive.
I would agree.
I would say unless you have a completely novel, breakthrough modality, right? Then that may be the one exception. If it's just, but I think those things happen once every decade. I mean, the exceptions here, but those are the exceptions.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can go. I like to think that we're pretty early. We tend to fall down on projects where somebody says, we've identified this new receptor and it happens to be on neurons, so it's a pain target, and there's a medicinal chemistry project before you can even really test that hypothesis. So, some groups do that. We tend to want a therapeutic strategy to have sort of announced itself, and that actually, for me, can be earlier than animals. Not always. One of my companies right now, we're doing animal work with Series A because it actually was quite complicated to take it into animals. So I don't know if that helps answer.
Question? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Mark Jarotinski with CMD Bioscience. I heard you mention about modalities a little bit, and from me doing my homework, what does the panel think of embracing peptide modalities? I think there's been some areas of interest at 5 a.m.
Big
And
stuff.
also at Pappas, recently there was an announcement with Foundry.
Apple trees, oh, we've all done peptides.
Things going on.
Mhm.
I think MedImmune has some interest in peptide, it may be glycomimetics, a few others. What's the feeling of peptide modality, and how do you separate that from the concept of a platform? It's not a platform, it's a modality.
I'll comment briefly. Anything that's been in humans as a modality ever before is better than something that hasn't, in the eyes of the eventual acquirer, big pharma, because their relative level of risk is much lower. So we like peptides over certain other kinds of exotic molecules that have never been in a human being, simply because we know the part. No matter how much we love the science or the chemistry. And so there's an attraction to that, but because peptides have been around a while, you have to have a novel twist that's protectable. I mean, it's clearly true of, look at RNAi, nucleic acids, gene therapy. Those have all been around for a while. What is your twist that's actually going to give you enough operating space to carve out something and move it into the clinic? So we're open to modalities without a doubt. That's really part of the platform. We do like things that have been out there for a while.
So we've definitely done peptides. I'm looking at two programs right now that are part of a broader company that are peptides. I think more so than protein therapeutics, I think often an antibody, for example, coming out of an academic source, usually that's a decent starting point for affinity maturation on other relatively commoditized things that I'm pretty confident we can do. I think actually peptide development can be a little more complicated depending on the specific attributes in terms of really getting stability in the pharmaceutical properties that you want. So I think there's some attrition there, but we're definitely open to it.
Okay.
Steve Friedman, Gladstone Institutes. Can you tell me what you think of iPSC technology and where you think that could be used as a breakthrough, not necessarily as a therapeutic itself, but in terms of changing the ways drug discovery is done?
Yeah, I mean, I think Doug Melton has done some terrific work in this space, and it's true that it could be a great screening tool for certain, cells that are difficult to otherwise, manipulate in that way. So I think that there's a lot of potential there. There's potential in therapeutics as well.
I just comment, the one risk we do have in stem cells is we haven't seen a lot of exits. We've seen Geron get out of the field. So we actually, in the simple fifth grade arithmetic, we don't know how much it's going to sell for. And so we're taking that a little bit on faith. Do we invest $30 million or $300 million to get to the end line? And so that's a calculation we have to do. And not only that, we have to find 3 like-minded investors to come in on a deal.
Is there an angle that's not been explored?
Yeah, if you've already got a partnership with a pharma on a service, that would be very valuable.
I can think of one, but I can't say it here. We're looking at one right now. But I worry that the cells that are coming out the back end aren't necessarily what you think they are. I think it's still going to be really complicated. And many people here probably know the science better than I do.
Next question, move on.
Yeah, I heard you use $40 million in evaluation. But do you look at, for example, private or public companies in the same space that company is in, or other kinds of evaluation research?
So investing in public companies, you're saying?
No. A value, not just, that's an arbitrary number, particularly 30 or 40, but
yeah.
As far as a company, trying to evaluate it compared to other private or public companies that were similar.
That's exactly what it's based on. I mean, it's very simple. We know exactly what the window of evaluations every IPO has been for the last 2 years. If we can say, we're not going to be, the Algius that goes out for a gazillion or Bluebird, we're going to be in the middle of that window. How do we give everybody a step up in value? This round of investors, the crossover investors, the public buyers at 20, 30, 80%. To get to that value, because that's a sure number. Say it's 150 million in your space. Then just do the back math, how many dollars you need to get there, and you can find your value. It's not very hard. And another comment I want to make, in this trust thing, we do deals with people. When we're the lead investor and it's an early deal, if it takes 6, 9 months or longer from the first day we meet to even put a term sheet in. I'm doing one now, I met the company 2 years ago. And every step of the way we help them figure it out. And as a result, we haven't invested one. And I'm sure that's true of everybody in the panel here. Just have to build a relationship and go. But we can talk more about valuation later. Yeah.
5 minutes.
5 minutes, all right, 5 minutes. So we need a brilliant question. Yeah.
I know the focus today has been more on the therapeutic side. But
Yeah.
what about interest in lifestyle drugs where reimbursement is not an issue? For example, the aesthetic market. Any experience, interest on the private equity side in early stage companies?
There have definitely been great successes. You know, Kythera was venture backed and recently sold to Allergan for over $2 billion. Our venture fund doesn't focus on that. I mean, we all are committed to making a difference, in truly unmet medical need. But it doesn't mean that you can't get it back, and plenty of investors that do.
We definitely look at those. We haven't done one yet. We're a little shy about straight consumer plays. I'd say the one differentiation that comes out is two. One is the intellectual property. We're lucky because in the biotech space, we have IP that makes a two-person company as valuable as somebody's got 500 people in their company, which is not true in IT at all. We do a lot of health IT. IP is actually a waste of money in the end over there. And so the other is the regulatory. What does the regulatory event look like? And so that's a time factor, because all you're going to have is a lead position over the people's where we're working. I'm sure you may have IP, you may have some way to carve it out, but we have to see that in a short amount of money, a short amount of time, we're going to get it far enough ahead of the competition that we can actually exit for a premium. But we're very interested in those spaces. I think we've done one. That's it. Yeah, go ahead. Behind you. Wait, no, behind you.
Yes. Question, Wenan Yang from Sarasota. You talked about your preclinical stage investment.
Right.
Do you have any timeline in your mind that how long they have to be able to bring to the clinical stage?
From the date we invest, you mean?
Yes.
We're more about the amount of money we're putting in this round to get us there. So.
Time is money.
And I understand, but it has to be clinical. Sometimes phase one, let me rephrase, sometimes phase one data is meaningful because you're repurposing a drug that was toxic. Sometimes you have to have phase two to figure, and sometimes you need to figure out the indication of multiple phase twos in oncology, for example. So our firm needs to be able to see what the phase three is going to look at the end of the money.
But for us, we won't invest in something that is more than 2 years out from the clinic.
That's good.
So we're perhaps 2.5 years to IND, so a bit broader, but for some of our academic spin-out seed stage companies, we take a broader look if the technology is really breakthrough.
And Sam, you're really early.
We can go really early, but I still think it's 3 to 4 years at the outset. I mean, it's nice if it's faster, but it depends why it's slower, right? But I think we want to see consistent progress in addressing questions that effectively change the discount rate you attach to the future cash flows, right? You want to de-risk by saying it works, it's safe, all these different things. And as long as you're making that progress, I think we have a path there, I think we can do it.
And just to follow up Sam's point, I think what really helps is having a pre-IND meeting and having minutes from that meeting. So having feedback from the regulatory authorities on what your critical path items are, and then being able to build a plan around, okay, how do I tackle those items so I can get to an IND? It's not just this pie in the sky and I get there, but I can see the road ahead and I know exactly where I'm going to go, and I know that when I get there, the regulatory authorities are going to let me go into thinking.
Okay, with that I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to thank the panelists. They did a great job. Thank you for your questions. Go around, come see us, all right?
Who gets the book?